Hey, Durham. I interviewed Durham City Council candidate Bonita Green and Mimi Kessler. Both are very involved with Durham's Interneighborhood Council, or INC, and are very concerned about SCAD, otherwise known as Simplified Code for Affordable Development, which will be voted on by Durham City Council on August 21st. SCAD is promoted by the developers as making housing more affordable. But is it really making it more affordable for the developers by deregulation and circumventing the public process? In the long run, this will potentially negatively impact a lot of Durham citizens. Please listen to this enlightening discussion and contact Durham City Council about your concerns regarding SCAD before August 21st.
SCAD is short for Simplified Codes for Affordable Development.
And do you think SCAD does what it says?
No, it doesn't simplify the codes. There's nothing in it that actually provides for meaningful, affordable development. And it is primarily to make things go faster for developers.
So basically it's streamlining the developers.
Yes, it's streamlining the developer's process.
Yeah, so who benefits the most from SCAD?
The developers,
of course. What concerns me most about SCAD is that it would make it easier, of course, for developers to develop, but it's not addressing the need for housing that Durham currently needs. We need housing for people at every income level, and the developers are only addressing market rate properties and building. And also that there's a lot of hidden things within this document. It's not completely transparent in what they're going to do and where they're going to do it, and there's little to no oversight or accountability.
Yeah, I think that what I object to the most is that it's very extreme. For example, we go from having required parking spaces depending on what type of dwelling it is or what type of commercial outlet it is, and they want to go for no required parking. That just seems ludicrous in our time now. I mean, we have to, yes, we want to move so we're not as dependent on cars, but we're not there yet. And people will be shooting each other over parking spaces near their house if all these dwellings are built with no required parking off the street. It will be horrible. And I live in a neighborhood where it already is bad, and we all have parking off the street. So it's just too extreme.
The shooting thing, sorry, I'm a little off topic, but the shooting thing, that would always happen at Northgate every year at Christmas time in the parking lot. There used to always be a shooting at Northgate at Christmas time, people fighting over parking. So can you even imagine?
Yeah.
You know, this even, and the developers say they want this to be like DC or like Atlanta. DC and Atlanta have robust public transportation systems. We don't have that.
Anyway, so I lived in Atlanta for 25 years, and its public transit is not great, but at least they have it. and it's just not rational to be that extreme from, I think apartment buildings, I think it's 1.2 or 1.5 parking spaces per apartment. And most people have 2 cars.
Right.
So even when they supply the required parking, it's not enough.
Yeah, it sounds like incredibly poor planning.
Yeah. And they want to do that because if you have off-street parking, then they can't build on that.
Right.
So they want all of the land that's not on the street to be buildable.
Mm-hmm.
It's maximizing their
density.
Yeah.
Right. And we do need to increase the density, but we don't have to do it in this extreme way.
Back in end of '79 or so, my sister lived in DC, and I moved to DC because I was going to go to beauty college there. And initially in moving in, she lived Northwest, and she didn't have a car, for a long time, but she had her car was old, broken down, but she kept her parking space because it's at a premium. And she gave up her parking space and then she got a car. Imagine you gotta park your car on the street and you gotta get up every 2 to 4 hours to go move your car. And sometimes you're parking like 2, 3, 4 blocks away. It's not like it's right in front of the building.
Right.
That's what they're trying to do to Durham.
Yeah.
You know, you've got these buildings and they've got waiting lists because people have multiple cars. They've got waiting lists where there's not enough parking. And then maybe there's permitted parking on the street, but if the permitted parking is all filled, what are you gonna do? And there's no way to live that you gotta set your alarm every few hours throughout the day and night to get up and go move your car.
Do you feel like SCAD is the fox guarding the hen house? In other words, like, should policies be written by the private industry that's going to regulate that industry?
No, I think that I felt that way in 2018-19 with the expanding housing choices. There was a developer panel that gave them all these ideas about how to loosen the code so that there could be more infill primarily, and I was like, well, wait a minute, why wasn't there a resident panel? You know, and at the time I said to the people in the planning department, you know, I get it why you didn't have a resident panel because you didn't know us, but you know us now, and I think you should have a resident panel, and if we, you know, if the developers want to do something, have the resident panel look at it. And, you know, and give some feedback. So it is the fox guarding the hen house, yes.
Yeah, definitely so. The bigger piece with that is that in their marketing, i.e. community engagement part of this, they're saying that this is for small developers, small local developers. But I was able to get one of them to admit that this provides a backdoor opportunity for your larger developers to come through as well. So yeah, it is a fox guarding the hen house, and we need to be diligent about pushing back on this, because while it's good for developers, it's not good for Durham at all. It's not good for the residents in Durham and your median income and your lower income residents. It's not great. I just saw something where in Charlotte now, if you're making $80,000 or under, then you can't afford to buy in Charlotte.
Right, that's already
And
true here.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's already true here.
Yeah.
No kidding.
Well, that probably does make sense, because a house that would have been, I don't know, like, I remember when $100,000 was like kind of a lot for a house.
Yes. Yeah.
And now these same houses are like $400,000 or $500,000, and they're not even well built in some
And
cases.
that's the thing, they're not well built at all. And this is another really big concern. So back in 2008, when you had the housing crisis in happen, the banks were not in the real estate industry. So foreclosure could take like 4 to 6 months because they really didn't want to be bothered with a house. The banks are in the real estate industry now. And I asked one of my neighbors, I was talking to one of my neighbors about this, and they said, oh, the bank told them they had 15 days. And so
15 days to
15 days
to
to be
vacate.
late.
Oh, to be late.
If they're late 15 days on their mortgage payment, then the foreclosure proceedings will begin.
Oh my Lord.
Wow.
15 days.
That
Can you
is-
imagine? And now I just heard a report where your bigger banks are no longer doing small mortgages.
Right.
And so you've got these little companies that get involved in predatory lending that are going to be giving these smaller. So it's going to be an even worse problem for Durham. And if you think about that the homeless population in Durham is bad now, it's going to be worse.
Yeah. And as these people come into Durham who work for Google and Apple and whatever, there aren't as many lower paying jobs as there are higher paying jobs. So if we have an influx of people, it's more likely to be people who earn more per person overall. So even the federal definition of affordability, which relates to the area median income, the area median income is going to go up. So even those people who make $80,000 now, relatively speaking, $80,000 may put them into the category of 80% of AMI. So it's really it's a vicious circle.
So lots of developments have been passed, as you guys know, and lots of housing has been built, but did it affect the housing prices to actually make it more affordable? In other words, have we seen evidence that the trickle-down theory actually is applying to the housing in the Triangle area?
Yeah, no, it's not applied at all. I think
Well, and particularly with the developments that they've already approved, when you add in 2,000 apartments or townhouses or whatever, it's going to make a huge difference, and then we're going to really have housing prices will drop, I think, at that point. But right now, what we're seeing is primarily infill. Other than the big developments, there's infill. And they said that, well, if we build more density, then the prices will go down. So they took down at the corner of Club Boulevard and Gregson, there's a very small development there that's actually one lot. It was a larger lot than usual. They took down one house. They have built 8 dwelling units on that. It's actually fairly attractive, but each of them sold for $500,000. And they were not
they have
sold
no yard
to
space.
They have no, yes, there's 0 yard space, but they do have parking, which was required at now. And they, so it isn't like they're gonna take down one house, have these 8 units, and then make them all, $200,000. They are maxing out the profits. And as long as they're doing that, there's gonna be no trickle down.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
even the on Gear Street, those 3 uber modern homes that were, when they went in, they were $750,000 in it, which was crazy. I spoke to a reporter who actually went knock on the door and spoke to the owner. The owner was like, they look good, but they're very poorly built. And they're dealing with leaks, roof leaks, and all of these other things on these, big 700. It's a flat roof, and that's notorious for flat roofs. But they're dealing with roof leaks on this house that was originally paid at $750,000. One of the houses sold about a year and a half later, and it was like between $850 and $890 that the house sold for.
So we kind of touched on this a little bit before about like the influx of new residents. Like, do we have the housing for that? Because there's more. It looks like about the same number of people coming in and about the same number of people leaving. Like, is there a huge glut of houses that haven't even sold, or what's going on?
No, the real estate people that I know, they say there's no inventory. But people want single family homes, which we're not really doing anymore. And they say that, like, one of them is a woman who's been a real estate agent for probably 40 years, and she only takes listings now because if she takes somebody who wants to be a buyer, they're frustrated because she has nothing to show them.
I'm interested to know how many of these luxury apartments actually sit empty.
Yeah.
Because when you have foreign investment going into, they can afford to let these things just sit.
And the development I was talking about on Club in Gregson, all of those units were bought by investors, not by the people who are going to live in them.
Yeah, and that's the problem we have in Durham. Yeah.
Yes, and it means that families are not building wealth.
Right.
So while
The
they may
rich
not-
are getting richer.
Yeah, I think people can't find homes in their price point. Is that one thing? I think secondly that there are properties that are just they're owned by investment companies and they're just sitting.
Well, and the thing that really bothers me is that the nurses and the firefighters can't afford to live in Durham anymore. I mean, unless they are married to somebody else and it's a 2-income family, they are priced out, and that just seems sort of fundamentally wrong. One of the things that has changed over the last few years is that they now give, particularly the large developments, the developer will proffer a certain amount of money to go to the affordable housing fund, and they will also give some money for the schools. But both of those things are insultingly small amounts of money, because these people are going to make millions and millions of dollars, and so why should we be impressed with even $70,000 to the affordable housing fund? A lot of them, it's $10,000 to the,
Right.
which doesn't even buy a toilet,
Yeah.
and it's just ridiculous.
Well, if you look at like what's happening right here down the road,
Yeah.
they'll make billions.
That's
They'll
what
make
I,
billions.
right.
They can make billions on that, and so they could afford to give more than they're giving. But unfortunately, we're bound. Durham is bound, and maybe other municipalities too, at the state legislative level, because the development or the builders lobby has a stronghold there. You know, and so we can't tell them to do X, Y, Z.
In the Northeast, they fixed this problem on the statewide level, where there is an assessment for every development. There's an assessment for affordable housing, and there's an assessment for infrastructure to extend the sewer system and the water system and have more fire houses and so forth. And they're just assessed a certain amount, and it's meaningful in terms of its contribution to paying for those things, but not here.
Mm-hmm.
That's why the developers like building in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
They used to give more money, and there was more requirements involved, and somehow it seems like that has just, washed away for whatever reason. And sometimes,
It's the legislature.
yeah, but the legislature, as you said, it's like the home builders lobby is very strong,
yeah.
and there's a lot of money involved in that.
The home builders and the realty industry.
Yeah.
Over the last 10 years, the development process has been streamlined. County commissioners don't have to vote on annexations. Our site plans are ridiculous. They're basically kind of like blank sheets. And of course, some of the complications of not having a site plan with something on paper is that you don't necessarily have to abide by buffers, or, it's like the 20-foot drop over at the Ellickson's house, So do you feel like we need less oversight? I mean, do the developers need less oversight?
No, I think that they need more oversight, but the city can't pay for the amount of oversight that we have now. So one of the problems with the building issue is that we don't have enough inspectors, and so everything gets held up because we only have so many inspectors to go out and inspect for whether the plumbing is right and whether the electrical is right and so forth, and that holds up their projects as well. I don't understand why we don't have someone who is looking at the grading that is going on each of the projects. And I have a friend who lives in this area, and there's a creek that runs behind her house, and she watched them, even though there was supposed to be a 30-foot buffer. The bulldozers just went right into the creek. And so I was not surprised to hear that the creek is fouled, because that was just, and as far as I know, A, nobody knows about it, and B, there's no penalty. It needs to be a significant penalty when they do things like that, but we have no one inspecting that.
Do you think that's on purpose? Because if you think about it, with all the money that they should be making with permits, etc., like they should be making a lot of money with the permitting process. All that costs money. Do you think they don't have inspectors on purpose so they can't write violations?
No, I think that they don't have inspectors because the developers aren't going to pay more money. They're just not.
They don't want to be regulated.
Of course not, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the planning department has a special relationship with the development community?
Well, definitely the development community has better access than the general public does. And that is an unequitable process that, the citizens of Durham used to be able to petition against rezoning in your neighborhood. 2019, that was changed at the state legislative level. So, you can just kind of guess about why that happened. But I don't think it's fair that the developers have an open door policy, but the general public does not.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the evidence of that is the developer panel for the Expanding Housing Choices Initiative and no input from the public.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And that was a sweeping change in the building codes, and nobody knew about it.
Mm-hmm.
If they had said that they were going to rezone all of the urban tier properties that this it affects, that would be about 30,000 properties. And if they were going for a rezoning, they would have had to send letters to all of the property owners for all 30,000. So by having a text amendment, they circumvent the notification process.
And I think they were hoping the same thing would happen with
The
SCAD,
SCAD, yeah.
that it would just slide under and nobody would notice, nobody would pay attention.
Right.
Yep, I would agree with you on that. Do you feel like City Council will approve SCAD, and why?
So I will respond to this by saying this. I mean, I find it very interesting that one of the developers on the project kind of brags that he knows he has the votes on the council. And so the question is, how do you know that? The other interesting thing is when you listen to the way the council speaks about development, they use the talking points of the development industry. And that to me is really problematic because, you know, our council members are there to advocate for the people of the city of Durham and what's best for the city of Durham, and not the development community. But it seems like it's exactly the opposite. The message that they send each time they vote to pass a development is that we don't care about the people who live in Durham. We only care about the new people that are coming.
Yes, I think that the current residents are way being left behind, and are just not a priority at all. And they're just they've been given information about why these developments are not the type of developments we should have, and they completely ignore it. And there was a meeting that was supposed to be with the county commission, the city council, and the planning commission. The city council didn't show up because they said they had a scheduling conflict. But I attended part of that meeting. And at the end, the city council representatives were frustrated that the planning commissioners weren't telling them what to do. And they basically said, we do tell you what to do. And there was like this staring back and forth. And the particular city council person that was complaining was really agitated. I mean, I think he really wanted to hear from the planning commissioners that they would go along with more than they do. And so I just feel like that it's everybody knows what the votes are going to be because there doesn't seem to be any discretion. Every single development gets approved by 4 people on council, and 3 people will vote against things. If it's a good proposal, and all of them will vote yes, but we haven't seen any good proposals lately. So it's just there are lots of potential reasons why that group of 4 vote the way they do.
Do you feel like there has been some dishonesty associated with SCAD? Like, for instance, the Habitat for Humanity scandal? Or maybe there's some other, sort of like dishonest.
Well, I went to, I think we both attended a meeting in Walltown. It was one of their first alleged community engagement type meetings. And it was less of an education about what SCAD was and what was in it. It was more of a marketing campaign. And the thing that I really found interesting or question was the fact that when people were asking very hard-hitting questions, they became very defensive.
They actually started attacking the person asking the question.
Wow.
And there was one person there who called them on it. And I was like, you go.
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah, and so it's like, if you're that defensive, there must be something in here that you don't want people to know about. And then the part where they were like, oh, the ADUs will be great because then it'll allow the homeowners to build an ADU in their backyard and they can provide affordable housing and blah, blah, blah. There's no guarantee that whoever builds an ADU in their backyard is going to provide for affordable housing. And so my question was, will this also allow for bigger builders, because once they're addressing the small builders, the homeowner, will this allow for your bigger builders also to be coming to do this? And they were trying to do the song and dance and the talking points, and I said, it's a yes or no. And they said yes, it's going to allow that. And so those are the things that they weren't fully disclosing all of what's in SCAD. It's great for developers, but it's not going to be good for Durham or anywhere this type of program is introduced. It's not good for current residents and homeowners at all.
One of my concerns about the building that's going on is that the built environment lasts a very long time. And I am very concerned that we are just throwing up houses or townhouses or whatever. We're just throwing them up. And that they're not gonna last well, which will be hard on the people who buy them because they will have to do much more repairing over time than if it was built really well. So inspections only cover what is absolutely necessary, and there's choice of materials in every part of building. And they are not necessarily choosing the highest quality of materials. And I'm worried about that. I'm worried about the homeowners who buy those houses.
Yeah, no, that's true. There's some houses that have been built around here. The structure is so bad, they'll just have to tear them down.
Yeah,
There's some lawsuits.
There are houses in my neighborhood, I've watched these people, they dig out the footings by hand. They're using no machinery, just total guys in there digging out the footings. They pour in the concrete and start right away building the foundation up. They don't allow time for it to cure.
Oh my goodness.
What do you think about Durham allowing for privately initiated tax amendments?
Oh my gosh, I think that this needs to go away. And this particular case with SCAD is evident of that because we've never seen such a large text amendment proposal before. I mean, the text amendment is supposed to be about one thing, one issue. This had 87 pages of it. The other thing about SCAD was while you had one developer's name on it, then you had another nonprofit organization's name that was added to it, but there was no signature from that organization. There's a ton of other developers and builders and contractors that are involved in this entire process.
Yes, it is a group of people, and they were the group that I think they're the same group that were put together by the planning department to talk about the expanding housing choices. And the expanding housing choices was also a very, very large text amendment. And it's made me realize how much things can change in text amendments, and there are routinely text amendments now. They used to have like one omnibus text amendment a year, and now they have them every couple months. Mm-hmm. And that's how they sort of clean up the mistakes they've made and or lessen certain requirements. And I personally watch those like a hawk, because there's a lot of stuff that gets through. And no, I don't think that the developers should be the only ones who can propose something. Technically residents can also do it, but you have to have $3,000 or something. And so, I would like to have them do some text amendments to cure the problems that EHC has caused. Mm-hmm. And I have talked to the planning people about that, and they keep sort of nodding their heads. And I'm going to make sure that I keep pursuing them, because these problems need to be solved. The stormwater from the house has to be contained on the lot, and it doesn't say that. And if they grade up to the property line and there are trees there, they've ruined the trees. they should pay for those trees to be taken down. And the only way for that to happen now is if they launch a civil suit, which costs money that people don't have.
Yeah, I really think instead of making their piddly little donations into an affordable housing fund, it should go into a bucket to when these sort of things happen to the citizens, you know, to their homes, that there's some money there to help them, support them, do what they want to do, even if it's to the pants off of the developer.
Oh, that's not a bad idea. Because there's just no recourse.
I mean, the money they have in that
Yeah.
affordable housing fund is not enough to build a house,
Right.
you know, so there is
It's
no
not even enough to build a bathroom.
well, a nice bathroom.
A nice
you know?
bathroom.
But yeah, but there needs to be some sort of protections for people who already live in the spaces, and there is no. And when you complain, then there's like hatred and vitriol that's spewed at you from the dais, and you wonder, well, why? Why are you so angry that I'm here speaking up for myself? What's in it for you?
Well, one of the things that I really don't understand is in the area where, so for each one of the proposals that comes before the Planning Commission, I look them up on a map and I mark them. And there was one today that I looked up, and when I zoomed out, I realized how much building was going on in this area. I mean, everybody's told me, but it was stunning. And they claim that they can't halt developments, even though the creek is fouled, even though the wells are being collapsed, and I don't understand that. I don't think that I don't think that should be legal. I mean, I think that if something is going that badly, that our elected officials should stop it, but they have not been willing to do that.
Right. It's not that you can't do it, it's that you won't do it.
Right.
Correct. And I bet if it were the elected official's house, like if they were suffering and
Yeah,
their wells
I was gonna
collapsed,
say that, yeah.
or their parents or whoever,
If it was in their neighborhood.
that's
Right.
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 Mhm. Yep. But money pays for some rose-colored glasses that, you know.
They're not even rose colored. Buddy.
So what do you think about the recent revisions?
They're insignificant.
Very insignificant. You know, it does nothing to address the really egregious things there, in particular the PATH program, which is kind of their concept of providing affordability in housing, but it doesn't provide affordability in housing.
So I'd like to explain what PATH is.
Mhm.
It's a section of the SCAD proposal that that has to do with, you know, especially identifying ways to have affordable housing by the federal definition. And they have specifications for rental units, which would only be affordable for 5 years. And the for sale units, they say nothing about duration. So that means that one person who qualifies can buy that unit and sell it the next day at market price. And that doesn't help affordable housing. Neither part, so no part of it does it actually help with affordable housing.
Yeah, and the rentals are 5 years.
5 years.
And this
This
is
is
something
also-
to consider. It's like, I read a report that the federal guidelines for affordability is 30 years. A lot of those properties are coming up and they're going to be pulled offline. You know, we're not addressing affordable housing. We're not building affordable housing.
We are though. We are building some. There are multiple plans, but right now, I mean, that's probably 5 years from now.
Yeah.
But it's
Well, the thing about my point was is that where are these people going to
go.
If these properties come offline and they're not affordable and they're not being rebuilt and there's not a space for people, where will they go?
So at City Council last night, the people at JFK Towers were allowed to speak, and apparently the people there are living in deplorable conditions. And I mean, feces coming up through the sink drain, and
AC not working.
AC not working.
rodents.
Bed bugs, flies, never mind cockroaches, and the trash chute doesn't work. So there's trash piling up. I mean, it's really deplorable, and you know, all of council was concerned about it, and the people who own that building, which is not the city, were, you know, oh yeah, we're going to take care of the problem. And fortunately, the residents that were still there were like going, you know, they said, oh well, we had the elevators working, and you know, and the residents are going, no, they're not working, and so it's a really, and what they said was that they were renovating that building, so they're doing it floor by floor. So, but because of COVID and everything else, the project has lasted too long, but it's just, I don't actually have the words for how outrageous it is that people are treated that way.
You know, I had said, made a statement at one city council meeting that housing was a basic human right. And I got a response, well, oh no, it's not. It's not a human right to live in a house.
Well, Councilwoman Hosey Hyman last night actually did say that.
Mm-hmm.
And no one chose to argue with her, but we should make sure that people are cared for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no basic human decency that's being shown. You know, and that's the least that anyone can do is show basic human decency, care and concern for your fellow human being. But we're caught up in a pattern of greed,
Mm-hmm.
And the worst part of capitalism
Mm-hmm.
that you could ever imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And where we're just willing to sell out our fellow human being for our own personal gain.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think the solution is to all of this?
Gotta vote.
Yeah,
We need new council. We gotta vote.
we need to
Yeah.
vote. Yep.
Yeah.
We need
Yeah. Because
those council
we
people off.
right, and we also have to do our own due diligence and understand who's running and why they're running. You know, everybody that's running has a little bit of an agenda, but we need to understand why they're running. Because, you know, we could vote the ones they're out, but you vote in someone equally as bad if you're not paying attention and doing
Right.
your homework.
Right. Yeah, and there's a difference between liking someone and knowing that they're going to do the right thing when they're voting.
The real thing that people need to understand, the importance of our municipal elections. You know, people turn out, you know, when it's time to vote for president in the big elections, but they don't turn out in these little local elections. And these are the ones that shape the policy, you know, that affect our day-to-day lives.
Exactly, our
You know,
everyday lives.
The big election doesn't really affect us as much on a local basis as these municipal elections. So we really need people, number one, make sure that they are registered, make sure that they have an ID, because an ID is going to be required this year, and make sure they do their due diligence and fully understand who's on the ballot, you know, and why they're running on the ballot. If we can't vote for people just because, like Mimi said, because we like them, we need to fully understand what their motivations are and if they're in alignment with our morals, and, well, not morals, but with our system of values. You know, a lot of times we vote against our own values when we vote just because, oh, well, that's a nice name, or just because they were endorsed by so-and-so and whatever.
And studies have shown that people vote for people based on name recognition only.
I think the biggest things we've covered is
Yeah.
that, you know, when it comes to SCAD, it's a tool that will be great for the developers to build, but it's not going to be good for Durham at all. And the biggest thing is like Durham is at a precipice. We are at this point that we're in danger of losing Durham's history and Durham's culture and what Durham is all about, you know? And people just need to understand. They think it's not in my neighborhood, it's not my problem. This is everybody's problem. And everyone should be concerned about this because eventually it will affect them no matter where you are.
Yeah.
So I lived in Durham after I went to college, and then I moved to Atlanta for 25 years. Atlanta was a beautiful city with lots of big trees when I moved there. And we are making all the same mistakes that Atlanta made when there was a big influx of people. We're cutting down all the trees, we're building all this housing, and now one of the reasons that I left Atlanta was because they have the worst air quality in the country. People think it's LA, it's Atlanta. And there's a heat island over it so that the thunderstorms that used to come through in the afternoon go around the city, and they're more intense because of this heat dome. And it's I don't think it's a good place to live, and I don't think it's healthy to live there.
Yeah.
And I see us making all the same mistakes.
Yeah.